largest investor-owned water utility in the country. Trades under the New York Stock Exchange symbol AWK. Pennsylvania American is a state-regulated subsidiary, and American Water has similar subsidiaries in 13 other states where we provide regulated water and wastewater service. Regulated means that we're a monopoly. We are regulated by a utility commission. In Pennsylvania, it's called the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission. They're responsible for rates and customer service oversight.
Anything else?
American Water.
These are all new. These were all new pieces for the budget.
Well, the utility budget was there.
Nope. Okay. Thanks. You're catching some background there. So, as part of being with American Water, one of the benefits is that we are able to enjoy American Water's purchasing power. So the company will purchase materials, pipes, vehicles, chemicals, even power in an aggregated basis. And those cost savings through procurement efficiencies are passed through to our customers. All savings go directly to our customers. That's at the national level. Again, the state level, we're the largest in Pennsylvania. Locally, we are proximate to the township. We have 2 water and wastewater operations nearby. To the west, we have a water system. We call it our Glen Alsace water system. Serves primarily Exeter and Amity townships in Berks County. It's about a 8,000 customer water system. And we also have a wastewater system in Exeter and limited portions of surrounding municipalities, where we closed on the Exeter Township regional wastewater system last year in 2019. Both those systems have about 19 employees and serve a combined 17,000 customers. To the east, we have our Royersford regional water system. That system serves approximately 11,000 customers in the Royersford area. We also have under agreement to purchase the Royersford Borough Wastewater System, which is a 1,600 customer borough wastewater system with 2 wastewater employees. So we'll have coverage of 13 employees in that area, providing service to I misspoke, we have 17,000, so we'll have 18,000 customers located in that area. Pennsylvania American as a company in PA employs about 1,100 people across Pennsylvania in various functional areas. So we have operations locally, we have engineers, water quality specialists, risk and safety folks, as well as business development, and then your corporate support teams. Our corporate office is located in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. From a utility standpoint, our company is essentially, we are a heavy investor in water and wastewater infrastructure. As a matter of fact, over the last 5 years, the company's invested over $1.3 billion in water and wastewater system improvements. And that's to upgrade water and wastewater infrastructure, to meet service levels, to meet regulatory compliance, ensure reliability, expand service into new areas that want or need water or wastewater service. We'll invest to be compliant with Chesapeake Bay. We'll also, we have a rigorous water and wastewater replacement program where we try to stay ahead of the maintenance curves on the lives of our assets. That investment last year alone was $300 to $400 million. So, we do put a lot of time, effort, and money into our systems, and it's what we do. That's our job. We're 24/7 water and wastewater. I mentioned the fact that we're regulated, and we are. We in the township have the same environmental regulators, which would be the PA Department of Environmental Protection, as well as the EPA in certain instances. So, environmental regulator, doesn't matter if you're privately owned, publicly owned, they're still going to regulate you to the water or safe drinking water standards. But where there is a difference is that we are regulated by the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission, which I mentioned earlier. The PUC has regulatory oversight on rates, what rates can be charged, as well as customer service. anytime a water regulated water company would want to make a rate adjustment, they would have to go through the Public Utility Commission in a process called a rate case. It's a process. It takes about 9 months by statutory law. And only after the company has met the burden of proof and provided, that the investment is just and reasonable, will rates be adjusted. And again, it really boils back to making investment in our infrastructure. On the other side is the fact that we're regulated for customer service. And, as a PUC regulated entity, customers will have the under our regulatory model, they can go to the Public Utility Commission if they have issues with service. So if they have, they can file a formal complaint, they can file an informal complaint. Those processes, there's a legal means by which they can go through mediation. They could go through a judge if need be. Now, our goal is to try to keep those customer issues at a minimum. We typically try to work with customers and as their issues arise, and have a very robust internal team of customer service folks and advocacy folks who will address customer service issues. An additional item I'll mention is that as a PUC regulated entity, there's also advocacy groups that are stood up and funded essentially from the revenues from the utility industry, but they're to represent customer classes. So you have the Office of Consumer Advocate, which is a state office that's to represent the residential ratepayers across Pennsylvania: water, wastewater, electric, gas. You have the Office of Small Business Advocate, an entity set up to represent businesses across Pennsylvania. So, and the PUC staff has a bureau called Investigation and Enforcement, also to oversee customer service issues. So there's this very heavy regulatory oversight provision both for rates and customer service that exist under a PUC ownership format. Lots of other information on PA American, but that's a brief overview for tonight's presentation.
All right, thanks, Bernie. So just a little bit of background on slide 4 here of sort of how we got here and sort of what the next steps are. So as mentioned in the opening slide, back in the early part of 2019, PFN was engaged to first perform a limited scope valuation of the system. And so that was done using the kind of the normal valuation procedures, just at more limited scope to give the township a general idea of the value of the system to decide whether or not to proceed to go down further steps or not. The decision, of course, was then to continue to proceed. So in June, we had sent out on behalf of the township a request for qualifications that went out to a lot of potential interested parties that are, again, interested in these kind of assets. We received the RFQ responses at the end of June. Those that submitted their qualifications, we had then pre-qualified them and signed various confidentiality agreements and kind of let them in to see all the related information related to the system that continued to be populated throughout the process. So that was kind of late June. And then July of 2019 through early 2020, there was kind of a lot of discussion with the interested parties, with the Aqua and American, going through the process, negotiating various documents that ultimately would be part of the bidding package. We met with them, conducted tours. Again, lots of due diligence was occurring during that time frame by both the township's team and the bidding teams. And I think throughout that time period, there were updates from the board to the public as far as kind of where things stand during the process. Then early February, we did then send out a request for bids, otherwise known as an RFB. We received those responses back in mid-March. And like I said earlier on, the bids were very close together in dollar price that we received from the two interested parties. So then that kicked in what we call the best and final round. And so those bids were due then on March 20th. We then kind of tallied everything up, figured out who the high bidder was, and then we did have an executive session with the high bidder as kind of an introduction on March 25th. The decision was then to move forward with the public presentations, which we've had now two prior to this on the 6th and the 8th. I think it's fair to say that we were kind of testing out, and I think it worked out pretty well with the Zoom application during those meetings. Obviously, it's conducting business a little bit different than what the township has been done in the past. Felt like it worked very well. And then today and on the 16th, we'll be having the additional public presentations within the consideration of adopting the ordinance that would ultimately approve this transaction with Pennsylvania American Water on April 20th. Then, assuming we stay on that timeline and there is a majority vote to move forward on April 20th, we would look to close on the transaction or settle on the transaction probably about 9 to 12 months from that time period. There's a very lengthy, rigorous process that's involved. Even before the documents are submitted to the PUC, a lot of work is done, say, for the next 90 days or so. After April 20th, to get everything in order, we file everything, and again, then we need to go through the PUC process, and again, look to close on the transaction about, say, about this time next year. As far as the reasons for exploring the sale, like I said, we were a lot of the team members were engaged in early 2019 and then throughout the year. But as the township was exploring this even prior to our involvement, and then as we were having discussions, there were obviously multiple reasons for exploring the sale. And we lay these out on page 5, where kind of in no particular order, number 1, retiring the debt of the township, which as of December of 2019, there was about $8.4 million, and we'll get into more detail. And that $8.4 million of outstanding principal and interest is comprised of sewer debt, general fund debt, open space debt, and a few other items. Again, we'll parse that out in more detail in a few slides. One of the personnel is a kind of a big component of the township's budget, and there are benefit packages for the employees, and we need to make sure that the plan is fully funded, not only now, but also in the future. And so right now there exists, at least as of the last actuarial evaluation, about $1.7 million of what we call an unfunded pension liability. And so one of the goals is to put basically that amount to fully fund the pension plan. And by actually doing that, and we'll get into more detail, but by funding that pension plan, we're actually reducing a substantial amount of expenses in the township's budget, which they kind of have to amortize this unfunded liability over a long period of time at a high interest rate. So the goal is to fund the pension plan to about that amount to lower expenses going forward. Point number 3, there's been a fair amount of planning from the township looking at its municipal complex, and some estimates have been provided by some professional firms to again give us an estimate on what that may cost, and that's looking like around $4 million for some of its capital infrastructure needs at the township buildings. And point number 4, regarding the sewer system itself, one of the goals is to eliminate the township's exposure to the capital spending. Basically, there's a cost to extend the sewer service to various sections of the township. Some of that cost is covered by tap fees in certain instances, but there's a lot of those costs that are not covered by tap fees, which therefore means those monies need to come out of any kind of sewer reserve fund, if any, or borrowing. And you'll see some of our projections assume a fair amount of borrowing on the sewer side if the township would keep the system. Overall, point number 5, just kind of eliminate system risk or system failure. I think, again, the goal was to sort of shift that risk to a qualified operator that's got good experience, not only the firm itself, but the company, but also the employees that kind of do that on a day-to-day basis. So again, a key component here was eliminate that overall risk. Point number 6, one of the goals was for sewer fee reduction, and then obviously very conscientious of what fees may look like in the future. So we're looking for reasonable future fees. And you heard from Bernie regarding the PUC process and how they scrutinize the rates going forward. And then lastly, also consideration of the tap fee going forward. See in some instances, the tap fees eliminated, in other instances, reduction, and kind of some case-by-case instances that we'll get to a slide later that Bernie can speak a little bit more to that. But those were basically the kind of the key 7 reasons. And so now we want to spend basically a page or so on each one of those, just to kind of highlight a little bit more information on each one of those reasons. So on page 6, this is regarding the retiring of the existing debt. So we have the column headers up on the top portion of this, where the different debt issuance are in column 1 on the left-hand side, and then columns 2, 3, 4, and 5 are the various funds that the debt is applicable to. So you see down in column 2 there, when you look at all the different note and bond issues outstanding, in column 2 there's about 4.7 million of principal outstanding regarding the sewer fund. There's about 2.1 million related to the open space fund. There's about 200,000 related to just general fund borrowings. And then in column 5, about 241,000 related to kind of the road fund. That principal amount for those 4 different categories totals in the box below about 7.3 million. And the total interest expense related to that outstanding debt's about 1.1 million. So that's how we came up with the 8.4 million that you saw on the prior page. That's the total principal and interest that's currently on the township's balance sheet. Again, relating to retiring debt. So you saw on the prior page the various debt and note issuances that are outstanding from the township. And so if we retire those, again, that's one of the main goals of doing this. So the township has kind of been looking at some long-range planning, and it's kind of still in the works. So sort of an evolving process, and obviously projecting that personnel and other operating costs are going to continue to rise in the future, whether it's inflation-based or some other higher percentage increase. And that's sort of non-sewer related personnel and operating costs. So by paying down this debt or eliminating the debt, we're basically freeing up township funds or getting rid of those expenses, that debt service expense that's in the township's budget. And so again, we're paying off, you see the general fund debt, the open space fund debt, the road debt, and that's reducing expenses. So on an annual basis, not just a one-time, but on an ongoing annual basis out for quite some time, you see in the box that, again, when you look at those different funds and the debt related to it, that's freeing up about $341,000 of additional expenses from the township budget. And that's in addition to, if you see the kind of the blue box down below it, that's in addition to paying off all of the sewer related debt, which is about 4.7 million. So again, kind of big picture, the township's paying off $4.7 million of sewer debt right out of the gates. That's getting rid of that liability, and then retiring the other debt, about 4 million or so, and that's freeing up about 341,000 per year in the township's budget. So on page 8, the second main point about replenishing the pension fund to the tune of about $1.7 million. So as I mentioned before, that kind of the MMO, or the minimum municipal obligation, that is required to be paid each year by the township to make sure that there's sufficient funds there to pay the beneficiaries over time. And so depending on kind of the market and how the investment plan is doing in the pension fund, sometimes these unfunded liabilities occur, which means the fund is not fully funded. And when that happens, that unfunded liability gets amortized over a longer period of time at a higher rate. Now, the township has shown to have fiscal discipline and actually has a very good rate when comparing to other neighboring municipalities kind of across the state and outside the state, but it's still a very high rate. And that produces kind of, again, a burden on the township's budget. So by fully funding that pension plan, we're reducing this MMO, or this obligation on an annual basis, which in this page is projected at about $100,000 per year of additional reduction in expenses. It's probably going to end up being a little bit more than that. We feel like we're being conservative by showing about 100,000 of reduced expenses. And again, so that's on top of the prior page, those reduced expenses from paying off the debt. So page 9. So point number 3 that I mentioned, the township has kind of done some of its due diligence and have received some professional estimates on what it may cost to improve some of the municipal buildings. Again, that dollar amount's estimated around $4 million. So I think those projects are needed, and so it's something that the township is going to be contemplating here in the very near term, which was going to involve borrowing money to complete those. Obviously, prior to the contemplation of the sale, there were not significant enough reserves to cover that. So again, borrowing was going to need to be done for this. And so when the township borrows $4 million and amortizes that over a 20-year period of time, that results in debt service of about $285,000 per year. And so in the box, well, maybe on the left-hand side with the illustration of the house. So in this particular illustration, we're assuming a house with an assessed value of $175,000, which I think is about an average assessed valuation within the township. And for your own purposes, doing the math, if your assessed value is a little bit less or a little bit more, you can interpolate a little bit. But what that really results in the box there in the blue to the right of the house is that $285,000 of annual debt service costs that the township would be obligated to pay results in a real estate tax equivalent, an annual real estate tax equivalent of about $183 for this example of an assessed value home of $175,000. So again, point number one, we were looking at reducing the debt expenses. So that was about $341,000 of freed up expenses. We were point number 2 looking at reducing the pension liability. That's reducing annual expenses of about $100,000 or more. And point number 3, by not having to borrow. So we're now able, if the sale goes through, township's now able to do these municipal improvements by using some of the sewer sale proceeds, and that's basically avoiding having to borrow $4 million or avoiding an additional annual expense of about $285,000. Point number 4. As far as eliminating sewer capital spending exposure in the future. So we talked about this a little bit at our meetings, at our virtual meetings last week. So the Township's Act 537 plan, which you may have heard about over the years, and others here can speak in more detail, but it's a state mandated planning document. So Upper Potts Grove is not the only one that does this. A lot of the municipalities, most of the municipalities around the state are required. Again, this is a mandated planning document, similar to a comprehensive plan, where it basically identifies compromised or failing on-site sewer systems throughout the township. The plan is approved by the Pennsylvania Department, Pennsylvania DEP, and going forward, the township will continue to be in charge of this Act 537 plan if the system is sold. So the township's still in charge of it, but it will now be kind of implemented in coordination with Pennsylvania American Water. So again, this plan is mandated by the state, so it has to be done. And there's many different things in there that has to do, but the key things are it has to identify kind of those failing on lot systems. And so throughout the bidding process, part of that process stipulated that the winning bidder would be assuming the responsibility to complete those projects listed in the most recent Act 537 plan. And those projects are listed below in the table. You see Regal Oaks, Phase 2B, and Horseshoe, and the Bruce Drives, and the Continental Old Orchard Drives, and those estimated costs. We're looking at almost $5 million for those costs, just for those projects. And again, some of that money would have been covered by tap fees, but a fair amount would need to be borrowed. And so now in point 2A on this slide, I think very important that the homes that are connected to the system under these projects that are mandated by the Act 537 plan that PA American will be undertaking, those projects will not have to pay the tap fee of $5,447. Next slide, Ben. As far as point number 5, eliminating overall system risk. So again, Sellington experienced operator eliminates the future risk related to the system. Again, that risk is now shifted over to the qualified operator, in this case, Pennsylvania American Water. There's many risks. We just kind of highlighted a couple of them on this page, where unfunded mandates from regulatory agencies, DEP and the EPA. We see, and I think Bernie and others from Pennsylvania American can speak more to this, that unfunded mandates are, I think, fairly common and kind of keep getting more strict over the years. And so now, Pennsylvania American Water will have to deal with those going forward. Overall system failure or major infrastructure replacement. And also the capital risk associated with the Pottstown Borough Authority. As everyone knows, the flow from the collection system that the township owns flows into the Pottstown Borough Authority to that treatment plant. And so they're responsible for that capital, which is then shared with, or the township's portion is paid, and that's capital risk that the township has no control over. So again, now that risk is shifted over to Pennsylvania American and Water as well. And kind of one of the big benefits to that is point number 3, where by keeping the system, those costs, related to those risks and other risks that aren't on this page, would be spread over the current customer base of approximately 1,600 customers that are connected to the system. They're, one of the big benefits, and Bernie mentioned this earlier on, is to take advantage of the economies of scale with the overall customer base. Pennsylvania American, we're looking at about 740,000 wastewater and water customer base. That those kind of costs now can be spread over a much wider net, as opposed to the 1,600 customers that are just in the borders of Upper Potts Grove Township. So that's a pretty significant benefit. And point number 4, I think it's also, we see this a lot in the systems where, right now, we're looking at also eliminating the risk to the employees. And so right now there's various employees of the township that they wear many different hats. One of the hats is sewer related responsibilities on a day-to-day basis. But now, we'd be selling basically to an experienced operator where those employees of Pennsylvania American Water are experts in the field, and that's all they do on a day-to-day business. So again, I think that's a key risk also of eliminating that with the employees. So point number 6 regarding the fee reduction. So we have this point broken out into a few different slides. So on page 12, we look at the historical picture of where rates have been going back to 1978. And you can see what that trajectory looks like to its current day rate. That average since that point in time has been about 6%. You see there's some years where there was pretty significant increases, and then it levels out after some of those. But again, this just gives you an idea going back long term what the rate trajectory has been. So then going into the next page, so when we had sent out the RFB, and Pennsylvania American Water, when they submitted their bid, they also included some indicative rates or some estimated rates, which a township had asked for, so we could have these kind of conversations. So the big key here is that, again, ultimately the PUC will set these rates. These are indicative rates or estimated rates based on kind of some of the modeling that was done and the various assumptions, but we want to be very clear that these are not set in stone. This ultimately will be up to the PUC. So we have the chart down below that takes into account basically the projected sewer fees as well as additional real estate tax increases for the municipal building projects that we talked about, basically that $4 million, to kind of give an apples to apples comparison. And so the green line below is the Pennsylvania American indicative estimated rates. Again, ultimately that would be set by the PUC. And so the first couple of years, I think we have I don't want to speak for Bernie, but and Bernie, feel free to chime in at any point in time, but basically there's going to be a reduction in the rates for a couple of years, and then you see that rate trajectory over the next couple of years thereafter. I think where the solid line is in the green, those are a little bit easier to forecast, but then just kind of the nature of forecasting, once you get out past 4 or 5 years, things get a little bit harder to forecast. But again, you still see the green dotted lines with the trajectory of those rates. Now, again, that's the sewer rates under the American Water ownership. If the township would keep the system, and we had a lot of extensive conversations with various team members on what the system, kind of what the rates would look like if the township kept it. So we looked at both the user rates plus the real estate tax rate, and that's what the blue line shows. And so, again, we did the modeling, looking at the sewer budget and projecting out where we think rates are going to be based on various needs and potential, growth and sewer projects that may come online, in the near term. And so you see out through 2024, we have that solid blue line, which again is a little bit easier to project, but it's still not an exact amount. Those rates are going up. And as I mentioned last week, we didn't foresee a huge spike, but they are going up. I mean, right now, they're around $860 per year. The models are showing somewhere around 940, somewhere in that ballpark. And then after that, again, depending on how some scenarios play out, we see it, either you kind of see that fan of the dotted blue lines with either a relatively flat trajectory thereafter or slightly increasing rate, again, depending on sort of what the future holds. But we feel like we vetted this very well with the various professionals on the team. And so that also, again, includes the real estate tax impact with the $4 million borrowing that we had talked about on some of the prior page that the township would need to undertake to move forward with the capital needs of the municipal buildings. And so basically the white space in between the blue line and the green line reflects the estimated savings to the average homeowner during that time period, which is about $1,200, somewhere in that ballpark over that time. And so in the blue box on over to the right, it's not shown in the chart itself. It just starts to get a little bit too much on one page. But there's additional benefits that we already talked about before about paying off the debt, funding the pension plan, which all results in the ability for to fund future operations and projects while better managing overall the need for tax increases. So there's clearly a more quantifiable impact with where sewer rates are going to potentially go. Again, they're just estimates, but gives you a trajectory. It's fairly easy to quantify to an average homeowner what the kind of the tax impact would be if the township did go out and borrow $4 million for those improvements. But then sort of the ones that are not quite as quantifiable to the average taxpayer are the ones that we had mentioned, kind of points 1 through 3, where paying off the debt and funding the pension plan. That frees up about $441,000 of township annual expenses, again, to better plan for the future, to be able to handle different things going forward that we're not saying is going to eliminate any tax increases, but it provides the township a better way to manage and more flexibility to manage the need for future tax increases. Next slide, Ben. So the tap fee reduction. Bernie, do you want to kind of maybe go into this again? We hit on a little bit, but I think it's probably better suited for you to kind of go into some of these details.
Yeah, take a break, Scott. So on this slide, slide 7. So this really talks about the existing projects pursuant to the township's agreed to 537 plan with the Department of Environmental Protection. And, as part of this transaction, Pennsylvania American is going to step into the shoes of the township and complete the projects listed under 1A, B, and C. Regal Oaks, Horseshoe, Bruce Drives, Continental, and Orchard Drives. One of the differences, we talked about differences, between Pennsylvania American ownership and township ownership, but another difference is the manner in which we assess new customers hooking into the system. So for wastewater customers pursuant to our PUC regulated tariff, we do not charge a tap-in fee to existing homes or businesses that want to tap into a wastewater line. So whereas those folks in these projects, if the township retained the system, I believe the tapping fee is listed as $54.47. For Pennsylvania American, there would be no commensurate tap-in fee. There would be a $30 service initiation fee, but there would be no tap-in fee, and that's not just for these particular projects, but for any existing, we call them bona fide service applicants. So that would be an existing home or business, say a house or a business that has an occupancy permit. Our tariff provides that we do not charge a tap-in fee. We do have a capacity fee for a new home. So we think of a new development or a new building. For those facilities, there is a capacity fee on the wastewater end of $4,000 per EDU to connect to the system. In addition to that, one other item that is embedded in our tariff is part of the bona fide service applicants section regarding extensions is a formula, PUC approved formula that calculates the amount of investment that the company can make toward extending service to new areas of existing homes. So based on that formula, we currently are able to provide $15,000 of funding per residential equivalent dwelling unit toward the extension of wastewater service line. So if there were a street that had 10 residents and 10 times the 15,000 would support $150,000. The company could make the investment to install the line, and then those customers would actually then, when they did connect, they would not have to pay the connection fee. The service line lateral under our ownership, we would pay for the lateral from the collection system main to the curb line, and then the customer would have responsibility from taking the line from the curb line to their home. So we do own and pay for the line from the curb to the from the collection system to the home. So wanted to point that out. It is a difference in ownership and in tariff regulation, but it certainly is looked at as a benefit for folks that want to need to connect into wastewater.
All right, Mike, Bernie. So on page 15 is the decision matrix that was put together to just kind of help kind of get everything on one page. So just to sort of recap, on the left-hand side are the 7 main points that we went through, kind of retiring the debt all the way down through tap fees. And then to the right of that, in the column labeled keep the system is a point or two related to that for each one of the items. And then under the sell system column, see some points with that. So we'll just sort of take each one by one. So point number 1, retiring the debt, again, about $8.4 million of principal and interest. Under keep the system, the township continues to pay that debt burden for some years ahead. If the township would decide to sell the system, there would be no debt related to the sewer debt or general fund or open space or anything else anymore. So all the debt's wiped out. Point number 2, for the unfunded pension, again, if the system is kept, that $100,000 per year of cost to the general fund will continue. And again, we think that 100,000 is probably low. It's probably closer to maybe 140,000 or so. Sell the system and you use that money to plug that $1.7 million deficit in the pension plan. There will be no more unfunded pension liability, and therefore, basically see a reduction or elimination of that $100,000 per year. Point number 3, the deteriorating infrastructure of the township. Again, keeping the system, the township's going to have to go borrow about $4 million and incur those annual costs of about $285,000 per year to the general fund. If the system is sold, $4 million of the proceeds will be used towards those infrastructure projects instead of having to incur additional borrowings. Eliminating the sewer capital project spending. If you keep the system, there'll be an additional debt burden, or to utilize sewer cash. So some of the models that we were discussing, had about a little over $3 million of additional borrowing on the sewer side that's going to be needed to keep the system and to kind of expand system in certain areas and utilize a fair amount of the sewer cash as well to nearly deplete that to cover those projects. Sell the system, obviously, that would not exist anymore. Eliminating, point number 5, eliminating the system risk and preventative maintenance. So right now, under keep the system, there's about $100,000 per year of cost to the sewer fund for some of the planned maintenance and other risk factors that have been built into the model. So, that's built into the sewer fund. If the system's sold, Pennsylvania American Water will assume all those risks related to the system and maintenance and the other contingencies. Point number 6, the sewer fee reduction with reasonable future rates. Again, the models were showing that the township is going to have to borrow a little over $3 million if the system is kept, and you see what those rates look like. We just go out here for a couple of years, basically going up to about $900 and $940 thereafter for a little bit. Underselling the system with Pennsylvania American Water, you see what those respective rates look like. And with the tap fee, point number 7, the connection fee, keeping the system, the tap fee basically stays as is, the $5,447. Selling the system for those projects that we had talked about earlier on through the 537 plan, $0 would be paid for those tap fees. So again, we wanted to sort of lay out what the 7 primary considerations were, kind of get into a little bit more detail with each one on those prior pages, and then this page here kind of sums it all up. So lastly, on page 16, just kind of as a wrap up before we turn it back over to the township for questions. Again, this has been this due diligence and exploration process has been in the works for well over a year, with both the township doing additional due diligence as well as Pennsylvania American. We went through the various reasons of paying off debt and the various infrastructure needs and pension and risk elimination. The bid that was received by Pennsylvania American Water of $13,750,000 accomplishes those goals that the township had initially set out to do. If the sale is approved, the system will be transferred over to experienced local regulated water operator, water and wastewater operator, and importantly, kind of a very important point, where the projected estimated future rate increases under the new ownership are very similar and maybe even a little bit lower than what the township historical rate increases have been over the years. And we saw from some of those graphs on the prior pages. And then lastly, in addition to selling to an experienced operator like Pennsylvania American Water, again, by freeing up those various monies, almost $500,000, the township can much better manage future tax increases and plan for the future, and make sure the township stays a very, very good place and where people desire to be, with the various rising operating costs and other infrastructure needs. So with that, I guess, Michelle, maybe turn it back to you.
Yep. So at this time, we will take question and answers from the public. Yeah, you just have to bear with us. We only have 2 people that are going to be managing the questions and answers, so please bear with us as we try to get everybody and make sure that we allow them to speak. I also want to note that we did receive a lot of questions via email, and our plan is to answer any of the questions that have not been answered at one of the public sessions, and also those questions that were submitted via email. Our plan is to hopefully have those posted as early as tomorrow afternoon, but no later than Thursday morning. If any of those same questions are asked at tonight's meeting, I will attempt to answer them if they were one that was already submitted, but then you would not see that one posted on the website and also on Facebook. So with that being said, Trace, if you're okay, we can open it up for question and answers. And again, please bear with us as there's a lot of people on the meeting, and I'm sure a lot of people will have questions. Thank you. Remember, if you do have a question, you want to raise your hand as we instructed in the beginning of the meeting. For those that are participating via telephone, at the end of The ones participating that can raise their hand, we will go through each and every one of those phone numbers and unmute you to ask whether or not you have any questions. Okay. Let's see, we have,
Like Evan?
yep, okay. So let's unmute. Evan? Can you hear me? Evan? Evan Brandt?
I think you have to undo his phone as well.
Do we know what his phone number is? There's a lot of phone numbers on here tonight.
Michelle, let's go ahead and get the residents while you're up there.
Okay, let's do that. So here we go. It takes a minute once I click on unmute for it to actually unmute it. Yep, and that one's not working for whatever reason. So that must be another one. Okay. Elwood?
Yeah.
You have a question?
He's
Yeah.
muted.
You got muted again somehow.
I didn't. Elwood?
Yes, can you hear me?
Okay, sorry. Do you have a question? Yes, we can hear you now.
Yes. As I say, I have several, and I don't want to take anybody else's time, so I'll be happy to go in and out if that is appropriate. I didn't want to get involved in this, but even especially after tonight's presentation, I do have some questions that concern me. Starting off with just the financial aspects of it, much of it makes sense to me if it were all general fund money, but since all the funds that you're talking about are spread out and paid by various groups, it's really putting the burden of everything onto just one group, the sewer users. As I understand it, there's $4 or $5 million that sewer system owners currently owe. With the sale, they're going to owe over $13 million. And also you're saying that the expense will be, the freeing up of the debts will allow the township to fund for future operations. But in the case of the sewer, of the open space fund, which is close to $4 or $5 million, I don't believe that money, I know that money can't be used for anything else other than buying open space. And so there's a section of the savings or the potential for township use in the future that you can't use other than for what it's used for right now. Plus, it's putting on the burden to sewer users to pay it all and not the income earners. And I guess just to put all that together and to phrase one part of it is, currently the township's open space expenses are not paid at all by senior citizens who live on Social Security, retirees, and pensions, and so forth. It's paid entirely through income earners. Why are the commissioners now planning to shift this tax burden onto retirees through increases in their sewer fees?
Trace, do we want to answer that question or do we want to let that go? I mean,
Well, for tonight, just everyone, if you would please just ask your questions and your position and comments. We're going to take those when we actually bring the commissioners online to talk about this issue. So questions pertaining to what Scott talked about and anything Michelle can answer from a procedural standpoint.
Okay, well then the question about the money being freed up for township use would not apply to open space funds because that money can only be used for the purchase of open space. So the extra couple $100,000 in debt service that's being paid for now cannot be used for any other purpose. So that was a question. Another question would be, currently all township residents contribute to employee pension costs. A pension liability of $1.7 million is now being paid down incrementally over the next 10 years or so. The commissioners instead plan to only use funds that are generated through sewer fees to pay this amount all at once. My question is, what professional financial pension advisor suggested that this is the best use for those funds and that it should be paid in one lump sum versus incremental method recommended through state protocol? That's a question. Another question would be, currently, if a private operator extends sewer infrastructure along private properties with functioning on-lot septic systems, the property owners are not required to hook into the community system. Will the new owner of the community sewer system, Aqua, also be prohibited from requiring such property owners to connect and abandon their functioning on-lot systems and become a captive rate payer? Should I just go on with questions, or is there any you can answer?
Well,
Bernie, can you answer, or Scott or Ben?
Yeah, I think we can answer the last question, right? The last question, yes, the township's ordinance will still apply, right? The mandated connections. Was that the last question? Will that
Yeah,
still cover under PA American? I think the answer is yes. Correct, Bernie?
Yes,
Right.
that's correct.
Okay, that's the one. We do have if you're referring to the township ordinance that does not mandate that people hook up to a system that's installed by a private developer. That would still hold.
Well, no, we're gonna have to go back and check that then.
Okay, because the township ordinance says that if a private developer runs a line down the street to reach his new development, the people along that street that have functioning systems are not required to hook into it. And that's a
That's a-
special
You
township.
said a
ordinance.
private developer.
That's a private developer, though. It's not a private entity, not a private water or wastewater entity.
I know that the township has taken the position that if a township is responsible for building a sewer line, that they can mandate hookups all along the line. I believe the ordinance was intended to make sure that somebody in it for commercial reasons would not be able to force a person with a private system to hook up to their corporate system. I don't see that Aqua is any different than a private developer in that sense. But again, that would be
We'll have the legal
question
team
for
review
you.
that. Elwood.
I'm sorry.
We'll have the legal team review that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Also,
Yep.
I think Chuck might want to wait on that.
Yep.
Another question. Will the new owner assume all township financial obligations to the Pottstown Sewer Authority as described in the multi-municipal agreement? Will these obligations cost our sewer users more or less under the new ownership? Will treatment capacity for new construction or for residents with failing on-lot septic systems still be available under the same contractual conditions? Basically, our relationship with the Pottstown Sewer Authority and our contractual agreement. How does that change, or how is that different based on the new ownership?
Bernie or Mark Feller?
Mark Feller, you want to?
Yes, first of all, it's American Water, Pennsylvania American Water, not Aqua.
Sorry.
Right. American Water will be assuming the obligations of the township to the Pottstown Borough Authority. There are still some discussions with that authority that need to take place, but that is part of the obligation of American Water under the asset purchase agreement if that is implemented.
So if you do not get as
And
good a deal,
whatever costs are incurred by American Water in connection with that, are built into the rate structure that they already have. They're not going to just, whatever they're paying Pottstown Borough Authority is not going to be passed through directly to the consumers. And I asked Bernie to just elaborate on that if that's not exactly correct.
Well, Mark, I concur with what you say. I mean, it's the existing agreement with Pottstown Borough Authority will be the agreement that Pennsylvania American will, through this process, look to assume and operate under as the capacity provider for wastewater to the area.
well, I do understand that you'll still be abiding by the agreement, but I'm just wondering if Pottstown Authority changes the agreement, makes it more expensive for one way or the other, that's obviously going to cost more to run our system and ultimately be more expensive for our resident. Currently, another question. Currently, when users are unable to pay their sewer fees, the township coordinates closely with third-party bill collectors to evaluate their individual circumstances. The Board of Commissioners know these neighbors personally, and they decide how far to push collection of these unpaid bills. The Board of Commissioners has never authorized a sheriff's sale or garnished income in order to collect unpaid sewer bills. When all else fails, collection efforts are suspended and a lien is placed against any future sale of the property, allowing residents to remain in their homes. What guarantees do we have about how the new sewer owner will handle unpaid bills of residents?
I guess, Trace, if I can back up to the first part of Elwood's question, I would disagree with you because the township has authorized writ of execution for sheriff sales on unpaid sewer accounts at Portnoy. They've done it for years. So I'll clarify that is the case. Now, most times properties don't sell for unpaid sewer because there's typically a mortgage against the property and the mortgage holder is notified and they usually take care of the sewer debt so that the property doesn't go to sheriff's sale because they have a vested interest. So that has happened the whole time we've used Portnoy Law Associates for collection of our delinquent sewers.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. I probably didn't take into consideration all examples. The point is, though, I'm wondering if the people that are in distress that can't pay their bills for whatever reason are going to get the same kind of personal attention as they get now when they can go and see Board of Commissioners and so forth. I'm just curious about how the new owner is going to handle collection efforts.
Ernie, can you talk to that?
So we mentioned earlier, we're regulated by the Public Utility Commission in terms of rates and customer service. Within the umbrella of customer service is a very rigorous process by which the company would work with customers who have billing issues. And most of the time, we're working with the customers on a payment arrangement type of schedule. There are protocols that we would go through in terms of trying to work extensively with the customer to attempt to be able to put them on a plan so that they can, get caught up on their bills. I'd also mention the company has various programs, one of which is called our Help to Others H2O program that is set up to benefit low-income customers. So some of the benefits of that program is that the company, through the funding, which is driven from the company shareholder contributions matched by any customer contributions, but their grants applied up to $500 a year. And there could be 20% off of a total wastewater charge. And we also provide water saving kits and educational materials. So there are regulatory constructs in place to work with customers that have payment issues. And there's also company-driven plans to work with qualifying low-income customers to help with utility bill payment.
All right, that's good to hear. Thank you. Concerning, I know that initially there were discussions about what the sale price of the sewer might be, and there was a fluctuation depending on how much the rates would be reduced initially. Can you give me an idea of the reduction in the sale price that came about as a result of giving a reduced price to our customers early on?
Bernie or Scott, talk about, we asked them to reduce to $7.80, what that would meant for your how it was incorporated in your price that you bid.
Just to set the stage, Bernie, we didn't ask them to quantify that number. But Bernie, I don't know if you want to talk about it or not, but that wasn't.
That might be too hard of a point to actually to answer. I mean, like Ben said, the bidding package was kind of already baked, that we felt like it was good for the township to reduce the rates going into it, and then you'll see the gradual increase thereafter. So American Water was not asked to kind of provide the difference in the bidding versus rates dropping or rates staying the same. And Bernie, you're free to comment on that, but that was just not something that was asked during the RFP process.
We did have two different bidding proposals, though, right?
Yeah, but not those differences, Mark.
Right, but there was a freeze for 2 years, and then there was no freeze, correct?
Right. Yes, but the whole time it was lowering the rate. There was no option to not lower the rate.
Okay. So if there was a freeze, what would the price be compared to the no freeze?
I'm not sure if they can come up with the answer at this moment, but I think the point is, and I just need to confirm, that obviously if they could count on getting higher rate from the get-go, they would have offered more for the system. If they have to give a discount to begin with, then they're not going to pay as much for it because it's not as valuable. So in essence, the people are paying for their own rate cut.
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, I'll speak, Trace. I mean, I think the point of that was to look out for people's rates. I mean, yeah, I think you guys were looking for sort of a balance. And yeah, I mean, you could have kept rates where they were and probably got more money. I agree with you. But I think one of the key things, I think from the first time we ever met at the township, was that you wanted to lower rates initially. So, I mean, that's what they decided.
Yeah, and that's what when we initially talked to PFM. Me and John went and talked to them. We wanted to see if we could do it that way. If there's an option of doing that, and that's why they computed that was why PFM took it to that direction. But let's continue to ask the questions. So the commissioners will get into debate when we actually start.
PA American Water did bid 2 different ways, correct?
Yes.
Yes, they did. Yeah, we can get the results. I don't have them up on my screen. I don't want to take down the PowerPoint, but yes, we can definitely get you the results of the 2-year freeze option. It just so happens that there's an actual there's a 2-year freeze anyway, and you saw that. I think it's on one of the slides here.
I think it was the last week's proposal.
You can see it on the graph here. So the rate is kind of froze out here and starts to go up in 23. So it's kind of a 2-year rate freeze, even though it's not mandated in the contract. It's just a timing issue with when PA American goes in for their rates. By the time they go in, we'll be out in 23 at least. So there's kind of a baked in 2-year rate freeze.
Unless they do it right away.
Well, they wouldn't be able to do it unless they went into the PUC.
Right. Okay.
My question was answered, and I think Mr. Ben, I don't have your last name, confirmed that yes, you probably could have gotten more for the system if you hadn't had a rate freeze. And that does mean that the people are basically financing through a borrowing, in a sense, their own rate freeze. I've lost track of my questions here. I'm sorry. I do want to get this one in. Currently, our locally elected commissioners set sewer user fees on the basis of local need. Our local residents can directly address any concerns they have about sewer service and fees by attending local monthly meetings, the township sewer board and the commissioners and so forth. They can even speak with their local elected officials directly. They can also make their voices heard on these matters at their local election booth. Under the new ownership of a private corporation and the oversight of the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission with offices in Harrisburg, how will our residents' ability to influence of operating their local system be affected? And I'm just adding into that the idea that I think you've tried to make it seem like rates are based on local activities and that we could go to the PUC and they would hear us and control the rates and so forth. But I believe when the PUC is setting rates, it's not based on just little old Upper Pottsgrove Township. It's based across your whole system. I could be wrong, but what I've read seemed to indicate that your rate.
Oh gosh, I keep muting him. I don't mean to do that.
Is he back?
Hold on. Something.
He's back. I think he's back now.
Did you have a problem with that question? I'm sorry. Did you hear that?
Yeah, I mean, maybe Bernie can address some of that stuff with the PUC and how they look at it. But I will say that it's very similar. So right now, Aqua provides water service to a portion of the township. And so it would work very similar to the way that procedure is right now, where Aqua is regulated with the PUC, has to go through the same kind of similar process. So right now, a portion of the township kind of already has been experiencing that for some time on the water side. But Bernie, do you want to maybe give a little bit more background on it?
Well, you're correct, and as I mentioned before, we're regulated by the Public Utility Commission. So customer service issues, they'll be handled. We have a internal customer service group. We have local operations. So we have multiple means by which customers can communicate directly with the company. Should those communications be insufficient, then there is the Public Utility Commission, which regulates, wastewater, water, gas, electric. So many of the other public utilities provided in municipalities fall under a similar structure by which customers can go through the Public Utility Commission to have complaints issued or addressed informally or formally. There's no cost doing that. Should they have an issue, at a municipal ownership level and go to their municipality and not be satisfied with the answer, the recourse seems to be going to a Commonwealth Court type of venue, which has money and expense associated with it. Working through the PUC is a service that comes to the PUC. So there are differences in the ownership structure between the two entities. But again, many of the municipalities we serve, the utilities are provided by public PUC regulated or are PUC regulated entities.
I think you are confirming my my belief, and that is that rate structures and so forth are not based on just Upper Pottsgrove, and the people aren't going to be able to come to a public meeting in Upper Pottsgrove and complain or whatever. They're going to be involved in a rate increase that's taking place across your whole system, not just Upper Pottsgrove. So the idea that we can be, better have our rates regulated by way of the PUC and the new owner, it's not as simple as it is locally. And any rate changes are not just for Upper Pottsgrove, they're for your whole system all at once. So our local people will not have as much impact on our local rates as they do currently. I think probably my other questions and concerns probably are by comment. I think I've been asked to wait till the end to ask opinions of various commissioners and so forth. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for your indulgence.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a Vince A. Can you just state your name and address for the record, please?
Sure. It's can you hear me?
Yep,
Okay. It's Vince Amalfitano, 135 Micklitz Drive,
thank you.
Pottsgrove.
Yep.
Yeah, a couple questions. I mean, I'm fairly new to finding out about this. I guess the easiest one is, when are you voting on a yes or no on this proposal?
The vote is scheduled for the Board of Commissioners meeting at April 20th.
Okay, so in 6 days, you're voting for this project. Would that be enough time to maybe answer all the questions that are brought up?
Well, so far, most of the questions have been answered at the meetings, and those that haven't been answered, along with questions that have been emailed, are being answered. We're currently in the process of doing that, and those question and answers will be posted online.
Okay. Second question. Those Act 537 projects that they brought up, I believe there was 3 of them. And I'm pretty naive when it comes to all this. I just found out about this meeting with the letter that was just sent out a couple of days ago. So I didn't really even know about this until recently. It looks like there was three projects that I guess are going to be the responsibility of the AWW, American Waterworks. Can any of these pop up in the future? And if so, would American Waterworks be responsible for those, or would they fall back on the township again?
Vince, when you say pop up, what do you mean by pop up?
Well, there was those 3 projects. I mean, if they come up in the future, if any type of these projects come up in the future, who would be responsible for them?
Oh, okay. Yeah, PA American would be responsible for all sewer projects in the future. Okay.
Then secondly, one presentation, they were mentioning about, if we didn't do the project, and they would have to finance $4 million, I guess, in municipal bonds, I guess. And they said,
Well, the 4 million was for the municipal infrastructure needs of the township buildings. But if the township kept the system, the township would need to borrow in excess of $3 million in the near term to fund some of its sewer related projects, along with using various sewer reserves as well.
Okay, and on that 4 million, you mentioned that if they went out and borrowed the 4 million, you mentioned that the interest on that would be $285,000 a year.
Well, that would be the actual principal and interest due on an annual basis. So you borrow $4 million, you amortize that over 20 years, you're going to pay both principal and interest on an annual basis, and that annual amount that the township would need to budget and pay for is about $285,000 per year for 20 years.
Okay, because I was wondering, what was the interest rate on that?
It was in the low 3s.
Okay. Yeah, because I was confused by the way that was presented. That was my error. I was assuming it was $285,000 in interest. So that was like a 7.1% rate, which is...
Yeah, it'd be a little high.
Yeah, exactly. And then I guess my last question is does the township assume, I guess with just real estate taxes moving forward, do they assume with this sale, they expect to keep real estate taxes lower? And then I guess the final question would be it looks like American Waterworks or any of those type of companies, Aqua, et cetera, if the deal is not done now, can a better deal be done in the future? Because really the only way these companies increase their revenue, besides cost savings, et cetera, is by bringing on new clients. So I guess, the old saying is no one to hold them, no one to fold them. If the township waits another year could they end up getting a better deal? Or two? Has something like that been considered?
Well, I can say, Scott, one thing is that I think Scott mentioned this at the last meeting, but we did evaluation. PFM did evaluation of the system, and this number, this 13,750,000, is at the very high end of our valuation. So it's not. I mean, who knows what could happen in the future? I guess there's always a chance that something could happen in the future, but I mean, this was definitely on the high side of the valuation range, so we can say that.
Okay,
Yes.
got it. Okay, thanks. Thanks for answering my questions.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Ben, were we able to mute him before I go on to the next person? Let me just, nope,
ahead.
I got it. Okay. So next up I have a Matthew Gaiman.
Yes, I'm Matt Gaiman at 297 Continental Drive. I just have a couple of questions. One is for the Pennsylvania American Water. Can they speak to average costs that homeowners see apart from the tapping fees? Is there a range that the homeowner can expect to pay above and beyond just the tapping fee?
Well, yeah. So once you're connected to the system, Matt, you'll then be charged the wastewater rates.
Yeah, sorry, not the annual fees, but like getting your house connected to the curb. What can we expect for fees from a plumber to put a pump in and a line from the house to your line?
You're talking about actually, yeah, okay. So the cost to physically connect the sewer lateral from the curb to the home.
Correct.
Okay, I have Joe Woodward and Jim Gable from our operating group on the line, and they've had some experience with very similar projects where municipalities like this, we've done projects very similar to this where we had to we ran wastewater lines to unserved areas. In some instances, the communities were able to aggregate, a buying power by working together with one or two sets of plumbers. But I don't know if Joe or Mike have a cost per foot or some additional detail from Mr. Graham you might be able to provide.
Bernie, that was Joe. What's his last name?
Woodward or Jim Gable?
Yeah, Bernie, it's Jim. Mr. Graham, there's so many variables that go into the cost in between the curb and your house, the depth, the length of it, whether you need a pump, you don't need a pump, the size of the lateral, and if they hit rock, they don't hit rock. It's very hard to just sit here and give you a dollar amount per foot that it would cost. Every job is pretty much bid individually by the privately owned plumbers. But like Bernie said, a lot of times when we do have these projects, there'll be like one plumber or two plumbers that would do like 3 or 4 houses in a row. And that's where you get your bang for your buck, is if everybody goes together, and it's the power of them installing that, because there's one after another, and it's more bulk for doing multiple services in a row.
And Jim, this is Scott. And I guess it's fair to say that if we're talking about kind of the homeowner's portion of this, getting it to the curb, that's the same whether or not American owns it or the township continues to own it. It's the same plumber cost. It's really no different.
Yeah, so as somebody who has a fully functional on-site system that doesn't need to connect, but is being told I have to, I'd like to know, is this going to cost me $1,500 or $15,000? So I'm just trying to get an idea of a ballpark cost above the tapping fee.
Gotcha.
Just
Yeah,
for
but-
Well, just to be clear on the tapping fee, if the system is sold, you would not pay a tapping fee. If you-
correct. That's why I keep saying above the tapping fee.
Yeah. What this is Michelle, Mr. Gaiman. I think I was conversing with you via email today. What we typically tell, homeowners is to, call a couple different plumbers to get an estimate of what those costs might be, because the township really can't give an estimate, and it looks like the other folks on the call here tonight aren't able to do so as well, just based on different variables on different properties. So I don't know if that's an option for you, even though you're not required to connect today, if that would even be an option, but that's what we typically recommend to the residents.
And then I would just echo Mr. Taylor's question is, are we going to be forced to connect? Michelle, I know you and I did trade an email today where you seemed to think, yeah, we did, but then Ben was saying we'd have to check with legal. I'm just curious, again, with a functioning system, if I would be forced to connect, if there's nothing wrong with my system. And if so, do I then have to remove the old system if we do have to connect?
Yeah, so what I can tell you from a township's perspective is that the township will require you to connect per their ordinance. Whether the question remains if it's sold to PA American, would they require you to connect? There was a question about how the ordinance is written or the intent, what the intent of the ordinance was, but I think we're going to need to get a legal opinion on that one.
That response would be posted on the website?
Yes. Any questions that we can't answer on, during the presentation tonight, along with questions that were emailed that weren't already answered, we will post those questions and answers, yes.
And then just a big picture question. I know some of you are new to the board, so you've inherited the problem, but was it discussed why a handful of residents will be paying for the problem versus spreading it out to the entire township?
Well, I think the answer to that question, because we did have a discussion on that before, is that if in fact the commissioners do decide to move forward with the sale, it's at their discretion what the proceeds of the sale can be used for. Just like previously, it was up to previous boards to decide whether there's tax increases or whether there was money coming into the township and where that money was put, what fund it was used for.
Yeah, maybe I didn't phrase it right. If there's a debt that the township has, and I think Mr. Taylor was referring to this too, you're asking those of us who either would be required to join or are already in the system to alleviate those debts versus spreading it out to everybody in the entire township, whether they're using the sewer system or not. So in other words, other than the sale of the sewer system, have other alternatives been discussed to meet the financial needs of the township other than the sale of the sewer system?
With the point, this is Trace, with the point of what you're saying with people having to fund it because they happen to be a sewer customer versus being a septic type person, we're going to continue to have that conversation. That comes up a lot, and what exactly that means in our discussion when the commissioners actually discuss this in detail on Monday. So that is an ongoing one. If any of the commissioners would like to comment now, certainly, but right now for us to have the conversation and holding debate, because this is just a question session, but we're going to address that.
Okay.
So Michelle, let's continue on with the questions.
Okay. All right, so let me see. I have Mr. Citrone.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm here.
You
Hello,
have a
everyone.
question for us? Hello.
Oh, he muted again.
Oh, sorry. This thing is
That's
touchy.
okay. That's
Sorry
okay.
about that, Mr. Citrone.
Now I got you. I just want to say hello to everybody. And my first question is, you had a meeting on the 6th and the 8th of the month. I never heard of it, and I'm sure that out of the 70 people that are on there, how many people have been told that you were going to have this meeting? That's question number one. Question number two, Moyer and Ming Drive was not listed as potential sewer people. And we already have letters saying that you're going to do this by the end of this year.
Right.
And I have one more. If I hear this correctly, if you sell it, which makes sense to me, might as well give it to somebody who's been doing this for years. We won't pay the hook-in fee, but it'd be our responsibility to hire a plumber to connect from the house, the frontage, to the street. Am I correct?
Yes. So to answer your first question, all these meetings were advertised via advertisement in a local newspaper. They were advertised on both on Facebook and on the website. So that's the answer to your first question. And this discussion has been going on for over a year. And there were a lot of meetings where updates were provided at public meetings, both sewer and board meetings. And they were also posted on the website and the township lobby. So to answer your first question on the public meetings and the ongoing discussion on the sale of the sewer system. As far as Ming Drive and Moyer Road project, the Board of Commissioners did provide funding in the 2020 budget to complete that project as a township project. And those people that are involved in that project, the township is going to handle, if I'm not mistaken, and Chris Pelkey can correct me if I'm wrong, but the township will handle the connections for those properties because each and every property involved in that project will have a grinder pump. So as part of the township's bid for the project, the contractor will install the grinder pump, provide the connection to and from the curb to the street or the house, the curb to the house, and also do any type of upgrades to the electrical panels that may be required as part of the grinder pump. So the only thing that so you would not have to hire a plumber for this project. And this project is to be completed by the township prior to the sale of the sewer system. That's why you don't see it listed in the projects on the presentation.
Okay. And now there was some question about that grinder pump. Some of us that live right here on Moyer Road are trying to figure out why we need one. We understand what it does, but there's been no explanation about why we need a grinder pump on our property. There's
our engineer on that question.
I'm sorry.
Let's keep the questions to relevance to the sale, if you would, please. And that would be a question for what we have on the ground already, and that would be a Chris question, Michelle, if we can get the answer on that one.
Sure, Mr. Citrone, if you have questions related to the Ming Drive Moyer Road sewer project, then I would suggest you email me those questions, and then we can get you the answers that you need particular to that project, because tonight we're discussing the sale of the sewer system.
Yeah, it's coming. My wife is sending you an email with some of the questions I had up already for you. Now, that was one of the big questions there. Okay, so in other words, you guys are going to do it before the sale is done. So
that's correct.
We are paying the hookup fee of the $5,400, correct?
Yes, the $54.47. Yep, and 52 cents. Yep.
All right.
All right, Michelle, let's try to get as much as residents we can. I'd rather not go for 2 hours if we possibly can.
Yeah, I'm trying. Okay, here we go. We got Bill Hewitt.
Hi, Michelle and everyone else there. It's nice to see everybody. I'm Bill Hewitt. It's 1387 Chestnut Grove Road. And I only have one question, and this is more related to the actual selling of the system. Given the current economic environment, is that going to change with the selling of the system? In other words, what I'm saying now is that, we're every projection is down. So concerned about this agreement where it's like it's worth $13.5 million now, but 3-4 months from now it might not be worth as much. So could there even be a sense of urgency involved with that? So that's it. Thank you.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are, this is obviously a large asset. We're talking millions of dollars. So there are limitations on how long the bid is good for. We can't hold this kind of proposal for too long, just again, given the size and scope of it. But yeah, the bid is the bid, not impacted by the current and the current crises.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Bill. All right, let's see. We got Chuck Note.
Evening. One quick question. Can they comment on their average response time, especially like on a weekend if something fails?
Ernie?
Yep, I'm going to start, and I'm going to let Jim or Joe jump in, but we have 24/7, 365 emergency service through our call centers. In terms of response time, if I could get Joe or Jim to provide some insight on that, from a operating standpoint.
Jim, I just unmuted you.
Yep, thank you. Yes, we definitely have employees on call in every single district that surrounds Upper Pottsgrove. We do have employees actually live in Upper Pottsgrove, and they're able to take vehicles home. So your response time, especially if it's somebody that lives right around your area, could be within 15 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Is that all you have, Chuck?
That's it. Yep.
All right, thank
Easy.
you. All right, next up I have Don Reed.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
I have a question for the commissioners and for PA America. There's a lot of open-ended questions. A lot of what ifs if we do sell a system. I think the commissioners have tried to cover everything. I've looked over all the financials that I can see. It looks like it makes sense to sell it. My question for both parties is, would they be willing to set up, for lack of a better term, a community relations board with PA America to discuss extending service to customers that maybe are not on the Act 537 plan? In other words, if we have a road that we discover 20 houses and 15 of them have failing systems, maybe instead of going to the PUC or those customers going directly to PA America, maybe the township could be an intermediary for that. That's one question I have, and one comment I do have, and I think everybody really should take a look at this, since it was on a slide that wasn't here last time. We are mitigating risk, and one of the slides, I don't know which one it was, says capital risk with the Pottstown Borough Authority. That is a big subject right there. The Borough Authority can throw pretty much any expense in they want and bill us for it. And, if they have a broken pipe, they can say, well, some of our water flows through, some Upper Pottsgrove water flows through it, and they charge us accordingly. So, this is a great risk management tool. Since I sat on the Pottstown Borough Authority for 5 years and on Upper Pottsgrove Sewer Authority. And risk is really what we talk about. And you don't know what's coming down the road. But anyways, those are my...
Don, this is Trace. We're going to do comments either Thursday or Monday in positioning. So if there's a question, I think you had it around the committee. Can we just go ahead and answer that?
Certainly. Yeah, the Community Relations Committee, or whatever you want to call it. I think it's a bigger discussion, but I think you know what I mean.
Bernie on the committee.
I'll take that one, Don. Great question. And frankly, that happens often, in our water or wastewater service areas where we serve or where we're proximate to. We'll have municipalities reach out to us from customers that have inquired about getting water or wastewater. And frankly, when we can aggregate a group of customers, we've had fire hall meetings or town hall meetings where we can come in and talk to folks, determine need. Our internal operation folks, our internal engineers are pretty good at turning some high-level estimates. We'll look at topography. We have a very robust GIS department within our engineering group, so we can look at length of pipe needed. It's often a common request and one we accommodate, and we would look forward to accommodating here in the township if we were the owner.
Thank you.
All right.
Michelle, why don't we go with
You see Doug Kern? I see Doug Kern up there. maybe.
Yep, that's who I was going for next. Mr. Kern?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Thank you. My name is Doug Kern, 1286 White Spire Circle. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking my questions. My first question is for the commissioners with regards to the BAFO and proceeding forward. My understanding is the BAFO, the two bids are typically within about 10% of each other, is why you go to a BAFO. Can you talk to the, let's say, the price or the cost going with Aqua as opposed to PA American. I haven't seen anything advertised as to what the pros and cons. I know the higher cost came in from PA American, but what about the cost to us taxpayers?
Yeah, I think the short answer is with the other bid, the purchase price was lower and the indicative rates were higher.
Okay. I assume that'll be documented somewhere, that once we can get out and get to the township building, we can see a copy of some of those details. Somewhat
Yeah, I believe
redacted.
I'll defer to the township and its solicitor, but I believe the bids will be available.
I think Chuck said that last time, that they'll be publicly available.
Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
through a right to know request.
Yes. My second question, or maybe groups of questions, is about the Pottstown Borough Authority. They have apparently stated that they'll have some say in the sale to a private company. Plus, they also have to agree to take in our sewage when it's transferred through a private company. Where does that stand, and can the commissioners give us an update as to, has that been resolved, or is that something to be resolved after April 20th?
Trace, I can answer those questions because those were proposed by Mr. Kern via email already, and I have composed some of the answers to some of the questions. So in regard to the Pottstown Borough Authority has argued it will have some say in the sale to a private utility company. Has this issue been resolved, and what is the resolution? It is correct that in accordance with the agreement Upper Pottsgrove has with Pottstown Borough Authority, the Pottstown Borough Authority will have to approve the sale of the sewer system, and this will be an ongoing discussion between PA American Water and Pottstown Borough Authority. And proposed to your second question, the Pottstown Borough Authority has also stated it has some say in whether the agreement for the Pottstown plant to take in Upper Pottsgrove sewers can be transferred to a private utility company. Where does this issue stand? How is it resolved? The agreement can be transferred to PA American Water, or a new agreement may be necessary. But again, this is an ongoing discussion between PA American Water and Pottstown Borough Authority.
Thank you. So is it fair to say that those costs of $780 could rise if the Pottstown Borough Authority decides to change the agreement? I believe it was just stated that they could change things at any time. They could flow additional costs down to us. How concerned should we be as taxpayers, and that our bill is going to change for something that's outside of the borough control?
Well, the Pottstown Borough Authority can do that whether the township owns it or whether it's transferred to PA American Water. That's what Mr. Reed was just speaking of a few moments ago.
It just seems like this gives them an opportunity to reconsider where they're at and potentially change our rates. Is where my question was going.
Well, can I just make a point? First of all, the Pottstown Borough Authority needs the waste from Upper Pottsgrove. I mean, they need the waste as much as the township needs a place to have it disposed of. So it's a mutual relationship. And as Michelle said, I think we certainly expect American Water to be engaging in discussions with them on an amicable, friendly basis to assure that the contract will be consented to and everything will move on in the way it's been done before, mostly. But maybe I can just sort of pass this on a little bit to Bernie, and that is if Pottstown Borough Authority were to impose some kind of a higher fee or a capital cost as a result of having to install a new pipe or something like that, how would that impact rates to Upper Pottstown customers, if at all? How would you envision that working?
Well, Mark, the agreement we have with the township is that we'll take the to be adjusted rates. I think there's a 9.5% or 10% reduction that'll occur before closing. Pennsylvania American will step into those rates, and those will be the rates we charge to the Upper Pottsgrove area. So then you would become customers of Pennsylvania American. If in the future any rate increase or cost that would be adjusted, then that falls under our 700,000 plus customer system. So the cost of a Pottstown Borough rate increase or the cost to maintain the collection system That would be a part of our rate base for our water and wastewater systems, and those costs would be socialized across our customer base. So if there were a spike in costs, that would be something that Pennsylvania would absorb across its customer base.
So is it
Versus the 1,600 customer base.
Right.
So you wouldn't be treated as a standalone system. You would become a part of the larger system.
So is it fair, following on that thread, that if there's a cost increase in any one of the 700,000 other customers that you service, that we in Upper Pottsgrove would potentially see a rate increase to offset the cost of some other customers throughout Pennsylvania or throughout your service area?
So what you're describing is called single tariff pricing, which is the policy of the Public Utility Commission. So all rates are combined for rate making purposes across the state. So the folks in Pittsburgh pay the same rate as in the Poconos and as in Butler. Those costs are socialized across the entire company. And then what it does, we were able to smooth out costs and absorb those and share those costs across our entire customer base under PUC regulation. Difference would be if you remained a standalone system, only the existing customers would pay for that. And should there be a major cost driver, then they would pay for the cost of those improvements or costs. So it is a different way to operate than what's currently been operated.
So just to follow up on that, are you saying that we would be paying the same rate as like all the wastewater customers in Pennsylvania, for example?
So initially you will be paying the rate we take at closing, which is the Upper Pottsgrove rate. And then in our next rate case, single tariff pricing converges all ratepayers toward paying the same rate, over time. Right now, the rates that you pay are actually slightly higher than our statewide rate, so that those rates would be adjusted into our statewide rate over time.
So someone like the Exeter Township, which is or borough, I don't know what the correct term is. They're paying approximately $350 a year for wastewater, whereas we'd be paying $780 a year. We're on the high end, right? And so is Exeter going to see a dramatic price increase? Are we going to see a price decrease? Or, that's a considerable difference. You're talking $500 difference between the two groups. How does that get put on to one rate? It seems like it would be a drastic change to either them or us.
So again, over time, rates will converge toward the statewide rate. So customers that, and it's all based on cost of service analysis that are done in rate filings. There's also, the commission will look at rate shock and the ability to absorb rate increases. So we've bought systems where rates have come in over a series of rate cases that gets taken under consideration when the company would file for a rate increase. So that, each system that's acquired gets looked at and incorporated through a rate setting process that's completely over the PUC regulated community's oversight.
Thank you. I have another question for PA American Water. Is what's your plan if this sale goes through? As far as I can understand, it's about 65% of the township residents for Upper Pottsgrove have the sewer system or will be connected to it. So is PA American Water looking to maintain that percentage? Is there a method that you're looking to increase, or is that something that is determined once a new Act 537 gets flowed down potentially in a few years? How does that, what's your outlook as far as path forward in the next few years?
Well, what we're aware of, Doug, is there are several projects that the township's identified in conjunction with the DEP that need public wastewater, and we're going to work with the three on hand. As I believe Mr. Reed mentioned, we'll also work with the community to identify other areas where there may be existing homes and businesses that either want or need wastewater service. We also work with developers. So if the township has sections of the municipality that are looking to develop, we'll work with developers to extend service. Similar to how water service is provided by either Pottstown or Aqua. We'll work with the community. We typically also work with the township itself in terms of its land use planning as to where water and wastewater extensions would be taken.
Okay, thank you. A couple questions on the slides, if we could. Page 6, where you mentioned the deaths that were incurred over the past roughly 15 years, if I remember correctly. Can someone just give me a brief overview of what prompted these deaths? Were these natural disaster related? Were they something outside our control? Basically where I'm going is what prompted these, and then what should we be concerned about in the future as for these deaths to just pop right back up if we pay them off?
Michelle, you want to talk a little bit about the history of those debts?
I can try as best as I can remember. So typically the sewer debt is most likely, and John Beeler can maybe join in as sewer committee chair if I'm wrong, but typically the sewer fund debt was related to funding certain sewer projects or upgrades to pump stations or installing pump stations and taking old treatment plants out of service that were private treatment facilities. The open space debt, so that was, an earned income tax. It went to voter referendum, and the township purchased certain open space and then decided that they were going to borrow additional funds to purchase additional open space. The general fund debt, I think, is related to infrastructure, and the state fund debt is related to a couple different things. Paving of roads, I believe the township borrowed $500,000 to pave roads several years back, and that's where that debt was incurred. So I think I covered them. John Beeler, if you're on, if you can just you've been around the township longer than me, if that's what you recall, being a former commissioner as well.
The state fund also has one of the dump trucks on it, I believe.
That is correct, Michelle.
Okay. I don't think the state fund, we pay a backhoe lease.
Okay. And then the general fund also has the police cars on it.
I don't think that was part of that debt. We leased police cars. I don't know that that's part of the debt.
Okay, let's go ahead and move on. So if Doug has more details, and we also have the budget posted online as well, Michelle can get you those more details around the actual securities that harbor those debts. So,
yep.
Doug, what other questions you have concerning the sewer system?
Just a question about, there was a slide that showed the differences in the yearly rates, I believe, going forward the next 8 years or so. And it mentioned what was going to be done with the additional funding that was saved. Free up budget capital, $441,000. So if I'm to read that correctly, I'm assuming that means that there's going to be no savings besides the rate savings to the taxpayers. There's no refund, if you will, for not having to pay on the debt that we've been paying for the last however many years that we've been paying it. Is that a correct statement?
Well, I don't want to speak for Michelle and the township, but no, there's clearly no refund being given back. The chart shows kind of the benefit, between the rates and the avoidance of the real estate tax increase for funding the $4 million. But the paying down the debt, the kind of the blue box on the right-hand side, paying down the debt and funding the pension, that's freeing up, about $441,000 of annual expenses that can be used for different things. I mean, as we talked about earlier on, there's, it's just inevitable. There's operational and personnel costs that are going to be rising over the years. And so by freeing up this money in the various funds, it allows the township to better manage, potential tax increases, maybe mitigate or lessen what those may be. We talked about, or there might have been a comment or question earlier, that part of the debt and this freed up money is due to the open space tax. which, yes, that debt's going to be retired. There's going to be now money coming in on an annual basis from that earned income tax that will accumulate in a reserve fund that will allow the township to redeploy that at some later date if need be for open space projects. So it gives the township a lot of financial flexibility outside of the user rates as well.
So who's paying this $341,000 township expenses currently? It's the township residents, is it not?
Yes.
So if this goes away if the sale goes through, we're not going to see a reduction in our local tax and our nothing, just a sewer bill based on going to PA Water. And this is going to be profit for the township.
Douglas Trace, for the proceeds and how we're actually going to interact them, that's after, if we do approve this, we'll have that discussion, see what the best way to use those. And you can see with the 7 and 10s there, you don't see that on there. So we'll certainly discuss it. I think we also brought up the open space part of that as well, because the debt will be going around in there. But we have, once the proceeds come in, you can see our outline, but the details on that, we'll have those discussions to decide how we're going to use those if we in fact pass it. We're gonna, Doug, you had several different questions. We don't have anybody behind you that hadn't spoke already. I think Elwood's already spoken. And
Yeah, I was gonna do the people on the
Please,
phone,
Evan,
Trace.
I'm fine. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank
you. Want to check the phone? How many phones do we have there?
We got quite a few phones. Let me go down and see. All right, so we got about maybe a half dozen. So let's start with
Evan.
6. Nope. Come on. I'm trying to unmute. I have a 610-633 number. Can someone hear me?
Hello?
Hello? Who is this? And
Hi, Michelle.
Hi, do you have questions?
This is Sherry.
Oh, hi, Sherry. I should know your number
Hi.
by heart, but I don't. Do you have questions for us?
I'm listening in.
Okay, so you don't have any questions.
Not at the moment, but I'm listening in. I might have to call you with questions, but I'm just listening in for the moment.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Sherry.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Okay, so let me see who else I have. Sorry, I don't know people's numbers by heart too much. So let's see, I have, here we go, let's do this one. So I have a 484-624-7929 number. Do you have questions? Can you hear me? Hello?
Looks like they're muted.
Yeah, I just unmuted them. They're unmuted.
I think it's muted on their side.
Oh, no, I don't.
I have no
show it.
questions here.
You have
Okay.
no questions? Okay, thank you. All right, I'm trying to catch them all. Ben, maybe you can
Yeah,
just make sure I don't miss any.
I'm looking.
Okay, so here we go. I'm trying to write down the number so I can ask the person. I have a 304, let's unmute them. I have an area code 304 number, 932. Do you have questions?
No questions.
Okay, thank you. I just unmute them back, sorry. This takes a minute because it changes the position of where they are on the list. So I have to scroll back down, let's see. So they didn't have any questions. Okay. I have a 302-598-7140 number.
No questions.
Okay. There we go. Sorry, this is taking a minute, but I have to go back up and find them to mute them back. Let's see.
Michelle, let's take one more. Come up on 2 hours, and the folks that you all are on a telephonic call, if you do have a question, email Michelle at her email address, and we'll get those answered. I don't want it to keep over more than 2 hours on this. So Michelle, why don't you take one more there, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay, I have a 302 number. Do you have questions? Area code 302 number?
No questions.
Okay.
All right. Well, Thanks everybody for participating. What the timeline looks like right now is we're holding another one of these sessions because I think we didn't have as many volume of call, but we had a lot more folks dialing in. I think we topped out around 75. We're down to 76 now. So any of those calls that came in on telephonically, please get those to Michelle. She's compiled all the lists and the like questions she's put together and working with PFM and putting those answers out there on the site as well. Continue to email those questions if you still have those. The intent is on the 16th, another one of these sessions, just like we did today, and then beginning the discussion and the potential vote on the actual ordinance on Monday, or which will actually be your positions, and you can state your comments there as well. So I appreciate it very much, and I thank you very much. So Michelle, that'll conclude our meeting tonight.
Trace, if I could just interject, if for the people that are going to be submitting questions over the next day, I will attempt my best to try to get those incorporated in the ones that will be posted Thursday. But if not, we will definitely have them posted by Monday's meeting.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.